Okay, I'm going to call this chapter The Ship. I'm probably repeating myself on some stuff a bit. This is a long, long story, so you'll have to bear with me. I'm probably saying too much about stuff, but it's all true. Okay, the ship I went to New Zealand on after I finished at the St. Alice Hotel and quit my job at Department of Highways. The ship was called the SS Arcadia, and actually I found, years later, I found a double deck of cards at a flea market that was from that ship, the Arcadia, and I still have a menu from the Arcadia where the drinks were like super cheap. I told that story a bit earlier, but drinks were like 10 cents or 15 cents a drink. Anyway, I boarded the SS Arcadia. I said goodbye to my mom and Lynn Swallow, who was my girlfriend. Mom came on board with me and looked around. Maybe Lynn did too. I remember sailing under the bridge, waving goodbye. They were standing up at Prospect Point, and we sailed under the Lionsgate Bridge. I was smoking, just, 18, 19 years old. Anyway, so I got a room in the ship. It was a 6-berth cabin, the cheapest you could get. My ticket around the world only cost $1,350 Canadian back then. That was 1967. And the cabin, they tried to make it so that you'd be in with people that are kind of like you. So there was 2 Americans, 2 Canadians, and 2 New Zealanders, or maybe one Australian, one New Zealander, in the cabin. And one of the Americans was a famous football player from NFL. He'd lost an eye, and so I guess his career had gone down. Now, the other Canadian guy, I can't remember. Oh, I remember he was sort of a blonde-haired guy. Gee, I can't remember. I've got a picture of me and him together in New Zealand. He's sort of a chubby-looking guy. I can't remember his name. Anyway, if I think of it sometime, I'll say it. Doesn't matter really, though. And anyway, we were pretty cramped in that cabin, but nobody stayed in the cabin, so we only went there to sleep. And mostly we sat in the lounge and drank, and they had a nice pool on the ship, and everybody smoked. I remember the food was English style, they had a lot of lamb dishes and stuff, lamb chops and stuff. And then the dances, they'd have a dance every night. It was a band. I remember seeing the band, not realizing later on in the years I'd be playing on cruise ships. There was like a trio, and I don't remember like a single act, but there was a trio. And there was, I remember there was one, I sat at a table with a couple other people. They seat you, so you sit at the same table. But the food was good on there. But I remember there was one girl on there I used to see at the dance all the time. She was sort of a dark girl, and she was beautiful. Really beautiful. I thought, I never did dance with her. I mean, if I did, maybe I did, I can't remember. But I could never find her during the day. I'd always look for her. I wonder where she goes. I wonder where she hangs out in the day. And little did I realize at night time she was wearing a wig. And I finally did see her in the daytime. She had sort of short, kind of brillowy hair. So, I don't know. She looked real good in the wig, though. But they used to have a pool there, and there was a guy I met from New Zealand there. His name was Dennis, and he was bringing a 64 Chevy. It was a sedan, but he was bringing it from Canada over to New Zealand, because they didn't have nice cars. They had very old cars. Everybody really looked after their cars in New Zealand. And so he was bringing that over with him. But we used to sneak up to first class once in a while, and they was a lot fancier, and they had a bigger band and everything like that. But it was a lot of fun on the ship. We were getting drunk all the time, of course. In those days, you could do that and get away with it. The waiter, we found a waiter we used to party down in the rooms, and the waiter would sneak in the kitchen and bring us down these trays of food, all kinds of great food. And then when we crossed the date line on the ship, they had a big party outside on the ship where they shaved some of the guys' heads that worked on the ship and stuff like that. And our first stop before the date line, we stopped at the Ilikai, or at Hawaii. And then we went into Hawaii, the bunch of us, and went to the Ilikai Hotel and drank there all afternoon. Just about missed the ship. We got back, the ship was sort of waiting for us just about. By the time we got back, we were late. But we were drinking Mai Tais and, all these fancy drinks. And then we went from there to Suva in Fiji. And, the Hawaii thing, it was the Ilikai Hotel is still there, by the way. But it was so exciting seeing palm trees and all that. Most of it were from sycamores. But we went to Suva in Fiji, the next stop. And I remember it smelled, it stunk there because they had a coconut factory or something. I don't know what they were doing there, but it didn't smell that great there. But it was kind of way more run down looking than Hawaii. Hawaii's American. There was a lot of East Indians in Suva because we went to a restaurant that's kind of in the main part of town, and we ate food there. And I remember it was sort of Indian food. Probably I got sick later on the ship from eating it, but there's a funny story. We went to the American guy. He was kind of like an instigator, so he decided we're going to go to a whore house there. So he asked the guy at the restaurant, "Where's the whore house?" So, up the street there. So we go, all of us get in a cab. I think there was 3 or 4 of us, and we drive up to this whore house. Now it's this building. It's a house, I guess, with the mother lived there and everything, and the daughters. I guess the daughters were the whores. I don't know, or maybe she was the madam, but. We went upstairs. There was chickens running around the yard and everything, and we went upstairs. And I never been too brave at that kind of thing. So we went upstairs and we were sitting in the living room, and the daughters or whatever they were the girls were walking around, and then they had this big bowl of kava. It's made from coconuts or something, or some kava root, and it's got alcohol in it. It's fermented, and so. I sat with the old lady and started drinking that stuff. And a couple of the guys went in the bedroom with the girls. I was too chicken to do that. And I remember hearing them in there humping away and making noise. All they had was like a room with a curtain hanging between the 2 beds. So one guy'd go on one side of the curtain with a girl, and on the other side of the curtain with a girl. I thought, that's not for me. I'd get too nervous to do that. So I sat and talked to the old lady about Fiji, and I had a good time there, just drinking the kava. Anyway, I was sick when I got back into the damn ship. And then remember arriving in Auckland, New Zealand, with Dennis. I decided on the way, he decided, you don't want to keep going and go to Australia because you'll miss New Zealand. New Zealand's a wonderful place. So I decided I'd get off in New Zealand, and he said, you can come down to Wellington and stay at my parents' place with me. So I said, okay. So he was kind of a fat guy, but he was kind of like a Ronnie Tomato type, like Ron Graham. He was kind of like an instigator and party guy, a real party animal, man. He used to drink a lot. Anyway, so we got his 64 Chevy off the ship. Got off the ship. My ticket was still good, so we drove down to Wellington, New Zealand. We went by Rotorua. He took me sort of on a tour. Rotorua is where all the bubbling mud is. It's New Zealand's a volcanic island, so it was kind of neat. It was like Yellowstone Park, It was called Rotorua, and I remember seeing the Maoris doing their dancing with their tongues sticking out and all these tattoos on them. So then I stayed at the family's house down in Wellington and started looking for a job. And I remember his mom used to serve mint peas with mutton. Yucko. I don't know. I can't remember how much I ate of it, but I don't think I liked it. I didn't like the mint peas for sure. I remember we went out for dinner one time in Wellington. We used to go to a club up in town. Kind of lots of neat music. It was sort of Englishy, so there was a cute-looking girls, with blonde hair and those milk white stockings on and everything. So I remember I still have a plate from one of the old Chinese restaurants in New Zealand in Wellington. And so I got a job working for a construction company. It was kind of easy to get jobs there. I worked as a laborer, and I didn't like it, but I got a job, and they were building a building, and they wanted me to go down in this hole. I did it, too, with one of these tamping machines that tamps the dirt down. It's got a square, like a foot-by-foot bottom with a hydraulic thing that's boom, 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 boom. And so one side, I'm down in this hole, and one side's a dirt wall, and the other side is like bricks or something that they're building this building up. I'm about like 10 feet down, and I'm tamping the ground down to make it solid. And I thought, geez, I'm not doing this because there's earthquakes there all the time. I'm going to get buried alive. So I ended up quitting that job. And then I started looking for a job, and there was another construction company called V.A. Draper and Company. And I got a job there, and luckily he hired me as a draftsman. I told him I was a draftsman. So I got about $35 a week there, or 35 or 40 bucks a week, which was good money in those days. But I could never find anything to do. He didn't have much work for me, but he ended up getting me to draw a big plan of his dad's farm, or his grandfather's farm, and I'd inked it all in and drew all the buildings and drew it all to scale, and it was a beautiful plan. I wish I had a picture of it. But the guys at the place where I worked, they always say, "Don't work so hard, eh? You're going to ruin it for us." I probably went through some of this in my earlier things, but who cares? But they didn't like to work too hard in New Zealand, so we used to go to we started at, I think, 7 till 4 every day, and we'd go to the pubs at 4 o'clock. They closed at 6 back in those days. We'd go to the pubs at 4 o'clock and drink after work, and they were stand-up bars. They didn't have seats in them. Everybody stood up and drank. When they had railings that you could lean against in the bar, and you could have. They used to raffle off oysters and stuff like that. I don't know can't remember if they were raw, or cooked. I don't know. People used to eat oysters in them, and one guy told me there was a bar somewhere in Australia that had the urinal right under the bar, so you didn't even have to leave the bar. Just drink your beer and pee. Ugh. Anyway, never liked those kind of urinals. I've always had problems going into bathrooms, trying to stand and pee beside a whole bunch of other guys because of that episode in Salmon Arm when I was in the lineup and people were pressuring me to go. And I could never do that. I hate that. Nowadays, at least, they got dividers. Who wants to stand by some other guy with their trying to take a pee? That's terrible, I think. So anyway, on the Saturdays they used to have pubs there where you sat down in chairs and stuff. That's the only time. Girls, I don't know if women were allowed in the bars, the stand-up bars. I just remember men being in there all the time. Women could come out on Saturdays to the sit-down bars, and the sit-down bars were lots of fun. Everybody had their own darts. Even when I worked at Draper's, they used to play darts at lunch. Everybody had these fancy darts, really big on darts. And we'd go to the pubs, and the Maoris they were kind of musical people, like Islanders. They would bring their guitars, and I remember them singing "Hoki Mai, Hoki Mai, Hoki Mai, Tiro Tir, Tiro Tir. something like that. And they used to like that song, Please Release Me, Let Me Go. They loved that song. And Green, Green Grass at Home. And we used to go driving around sightseeing on Sundays because all the bars were closed on Sundays. And so Dennis knew where to go. And so we used to drive up the coast somewhere, and there was a hotel. He knew the owner. You could drink on a Sunday if you stayed at a hotel, but he used to let us in anyway. We'd go in there and drink. And then when we went to Wellington to the clubs one night, I think I can't remember where, if I had my own bedroom when I stayed at there. But I remember that Dennis guy used to snore. Well, from the ship, I guess. Man, he snored a lot. But anyway, we went to the club in Wellington. I met this girl named Sandra Cross. I got pictures of her. She was a beautiful girl. Blonde hair. I think she'd already had a baby. But you could never tell, I mean. But she sort of was a little bit sleazy, I guess. But I liked her a lot anyway. And so I sort of fell for her because she was so Englishy, an English accent. And she had kind of weird hippie friends. And so we used to go out drinking and partying. I started wearing beads and growing my hair a little bit longer. I had this little vest thing I used to wear. I got pictures of that too. So then she talked me into going back up to Auckland with her because that's where she lived. Her parents lived up there. So I quit my job at Draper's and started to grow my hair longer, hitchhiked up to Auckland with her, and we slept in sleeping bags on the way. I got a picture of that too. And when I got to Auckland, I met up with Frank Babakaya from The Questions, and the Brown brothers and Don Rushmore were all living up there in a house. So they said, oh, you can move in the house. We got an extra bedroom. So I moved in the house and started looking for a job. And there was an ad for selling encyclopedias. So I got into I tried to go selling encyclopedias. The boss guy was this slick guy with a Jag. He had a car, a Jaguar. And he used to tell us how much money he made. So he took us out. He gave us this spiel on how to sell Encyclopedias Britannica. He had a little suitcase and all this free stuff that you could get with it. And anyway, so he took us out, and we went with him one time, and he showed us how good he was at it and all this stuff. And so anyway, I went out for night after night trying to sell, walking all over the place with this stupid briefcase, and you're supposed to leave your briefcase down at the side of the stairs and then knock on the door so they don't know you're a salesman, and then start this big spiel about, oh, you're working your way through school and you're from another country and all this stuff. I never sold one set, and I just about sold one once, but I never did. And so he was kind of too slick, that guy. And there was a lot of... So I quit that job. And there was a lot of nice old cars in New Zealand, though. We'd had that 64 Chev that Dennis had. And we used to buy these. We'd go to the pubs and when we were still in Wellington. And when you wanted takeaway beer, you'd have to buy it in a big jug. It's called a flagon of beer with a cork in the top. And we'd buy those things, or maybe they had a screw top. I think they had a cork, though. And we'd buy those things to take home with us to parties and stuff. I remember one banging it, another one in the back of the car once and breaking, and beer went all over the place. But they had a lot of nice old cars in New Zealand, so we used to... I used to admire all the neat old cars. And another thing we used to do is we'd stop at these little places at the side of the road. They'd have steak and eggs for breakfast. They're big on that over there. And they'd have potato and banana fritters. And they'd wrap it up in, newspaper like the English people do. It was very English over there. I remember going to the North Shore and meeting Sandra's parents. She lived over there with them. So I lived in the house with Frank and the two Brown brothers, and I think it was Don Brown and something, and oh no, Don Rushmore. So we lived in a house on the Auckland side, and her parents lived on the North Shore. And I used to go over there once in a while with her. We got drunk over there one day, and she pierced my left ear with a cork and a hot needle, stuck it right through. And there was a big band back, and that's when the Bee Gees came out. I remember hearing them sing that song, Massachusetts. They were from Australia. There was another band that used to come from Australia to play over there called the Lottie Daws. Actually, a couple of them just came to Vancouver. One guy in about 2019, he's still alive. Rob Frith from the Neptune Records had a meeting with him. I didn't think anybody had ever heard of the Lottie Daws. They were big. There was neat clubs in Auckland. We used to go to quite a few of the clubs, and I got pictures of me and Sandra in the clubs. I looked like Donovan back then. And so anyway, I had to get a job, and ended up getting a job in a food factory at, I think, at 25 cents an hour, $25 a week. A horrible job. I worked with this old Chinaman at first in the back part, cutting cabbages and onions, and then shredding them into these baskets, and they would take them into the main cooking part. And then I liked that job. The old Chinaman was a nice guy, and we'd talk for hours. I couldn't understand him very good, but I didn't mind the chopping cabbages and onions things. But then they put me to work in the kitchen, and these Chinese bosses. He was a nice old Chinaman, but the Chinese bosses were horrible people. They were like, faster, you faster. Yeah, screw you. Anyway, I got a job cooking shrimp chips. Now their shrimp chips, what they made were made out of shark meat, and they colored them with tripe. Tripe is sheep guts, and I remember having to cook that tripe. Ugh, stuff stunk. And then we had to make cabbage rolls with hamburger, and I think we made some kind of potato things too. But the cabbage rolls, we made them, and I had to mash potatoes once because I lost my contact lens in the potatoes and I couldn't find it. And I never dared say anything or I'd get fired. Their ketchup they used to make was mostly made out of old apples. There was hardly any tomato in it. I remember I used to make their ketchup, have to put in so much cloves and so much this and so cheap joint, crappy food. $26 a week, and then my friend, one of the Browns, he got a job being a lifeguard. He was making $45 a week and getting to sit around the pool looking at all the girls. But I met a lot of nice islanders I worked with from, I think they were, what island was that? A lot of them were from one of the islands. Sam was this guy that, he was kind of a nice friend. I used to talk to him at lunch. They were from, I can't remember the name. Everything was cheap there. Milk and stuff was super cheap, and food was cheap. So I think I only paid made $25 a week, $100 a month. I can't remember what I paid for board, but everything was pretty cheap. I was still going out with Sandy. I got a picture of Sandy in the backyard with me and the boys at the house. We had a grapefruit tree out the back. That's the first time I ever got crabs from her. She was a bit sleazy, that girl. Richard, you sucker. But she was nice anyway. But anyway, I remember getting a little bit itchy, and I remember sitting in my bathtub one day. I could see these little brown things floating around. I picked one up. It's a damn crab. And I forgot I did it, but Donna told me I'd sprayed Raid on my crotch to try to get rid of the damn things. I finally went to a doctor, I guess, and got some kind of stuff, Quilata or something. It was lovely weather there and tropical beaches, though. I remember that. It was nice to see sort of subtropical and palm trees. And we used to go out and driving around, or we'd go out and go go to the bars drinking, and I wish I could remember the other guy's name on the ship, that blonde-haired guy, because I got a picture of him. And the first day we landed in New Zealand, we all went and got drunk somewhere. Anyway, I had a nice time in Auckland. It was really good there, and I got a lot of great memories. I can't think of. We did the clubs and the la-di-das, and tried to sell encyclopedias, the food factory. Okay, and then I was starting to get low on money, and I didn't know what I was going to do, and so. Just in time, I got a letter from the Northwest Company band in Vancouver saying that they were going to fire their drummer, Jerry Ringrose, and they wanted to get me to drum because Rick McCarty was the singer in that band, and he'd been in the Questions. He'd been the lead singer. And so I decided I was going to go back. They were recording. The Northwest Company was already had records out, and they were, recording, and they had sort of hit records already, so I thought, gee, I couldn't miss that opportunity. So I booked a plane and said goodbye to Sandra. She came to meet me at the airport crying away, and the guys. So I lost touch with Frank Babakayev, my friend, after that. That was I never seen him again until about 10 years ago. I actually got in touch with him, and he'd moved up to Penticton and been up there for years, a real estate salesman. He'd been playing in bands up there and again in the Okanagan because he was sort of like a surfer guy. But he'd become a quadriplegic about 12 years ago or something. He'd fallen off his surfboard in Hawaii and broke his neck, and he was stuck in bed as a quadriplegic, and then he got mesothelioma from probably being under that place in Ioko. What a horrible ending for Frank. He was a really good guitar player, and he died of mesothelioma. Anyway, I got on the plane, and it took me 20 hours to fly back to L.A., and we landed in Tahiti. I remember looking down at Tahiti. It was very French, but what a beautiful island from the air. It looked so nice. Then I transferred in Los Angeles and flew to Vancouver, and I guess probably Rick McCarty probably picked me up at the airport. Gowan is the one that wrote me the letter from the Northwest Company. He was the instigator in that band. But I've got whole chapters on the Northwest Company. So then I came back and started living at McCarty's place, Rick McCarty's parents' place out in Maple Ridge. And that's the next chapter coming up.